Hello, my name is Travis Newbill. I live and work here at Shambhala Mountain Center, where we're very excited to be hosting a program coming up in June that is titled Everything is Workable, Transforming Everyday Conflicts into Creative Opportunities. That's going to be led by Diane Musho Hamilton, who I'm glad to have on the line for some discussion here today. For those of you who aren't familiar, Diane is an author, professional mediator, and master facilitator. She's been a meditator. Those two words are related, and she talks about that in some of her teachings. She's been a meditator for more than 30 years and is a Zen priest and teacher in the White Plum lineage. She lives in Utah, where she's joining us from today, where she is also the executive director of Two Arrows Zen, a center for Zen study and practice. And she's the lead trainer for Integral Facilitator, certifying practitioners in the developmental approach to group facilitation. She's the author of Everything is Workable, a Zen Approach to Conflict Resolution, which is a book that Shambhala Publications has put out, and I've gotten into just a little bit, and I'm delighted to open up some of the ideas that she presents in there a little bit with her today. So Diane, thank you so much for taking some time to connect today.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm happy to be here. Great.
So to start, maybe we just begin, maybe just a couple of minutes, in your path of practice and teaching and working with community. What was it, or what was the trajectory there that led you into a sort of focused exploration of this topic of conflict? Why is it important to your path?
Well, I grew up in a very fiery family, and I think that lots of us, are seeking to clarify or to understand the experience that we grew up in. So my work in conflict resolution has roots in the deep love I had for my family, and also the frustration that I had as a child in watching us struggle and not being able to figure out how there could be so much love and yet we could miss each other so consistently. So that would be kind of the historical perspective from a personal point of view. I think that I also have a very deep connection to Dharma, which I've had it's sort of inexplicable in a way, in the sense that how does someone who grew up in the American West riding horses in the mountain and going to rodeos as a child end up studying Buddhism when I'm in my early 20s? And I remember that I was a philosophy student, and I took a class on emotion and the philosophy of emotion. And it was very clear to me that a philosophical approach to emotion wasn't really going to work, and that I had to actually come to understand something about it. And so I came to Naropa Institute, and I talk a little bit more about how that happened for me. And for whatever reason, there's a Zen master that says, until you can really close the gap, that kind of dualistic approach to your life, that it doesn't scratch the itch. And so when I got to Naropa and I started looking at things from the perspective of meditation and maybe from the inside out, suddenly things did become much more workable, to use this is Chogyam Trungpa's phrase. Everything that arises in the confused mind is regarded as the path. So I think I was just highly, highly influenced at a very early time in my life that I could work with my own mind. And because I could learn to work with my own mind and my own emotions and develop my own heart, I should be able to do that with other people. And yet I found that my insight from meditation didn't necessarily move into my relationships, and that the skills I learned as a mediator didn't necessarily help me on the cushion. Although I think once you make the right links, it can. So that's kind of how it came about for me.
So there's a couple of things that we share is that I was also studied philosophy as an undergraduate, and that my path has been influenced, to say the least, by the teachings of Chogyam Trungpa, and this, especially this notion that that you have a great understanding of, and that way of working with emotions that is not philosophical or removed, and that is not one of getting rid of challenging emotions, but including them in some way, and the emotions become an important aspect of our being, an unavoidable aspect. I wonder if you could say something about, like, how does that occur, and maybe especially in the context of conflict, like what role do the emotions play, and what's how might you describe a healthy or productive or good approach to relating with them?
Okay. All right, I'll do that. But first I need to ask permission from the audience just to play fast and loose with a little bit of the brain science.
Oh,
I have a couple good friends who are doing some of the research in the brain science and meditation area, and they say they enjoy it when people like me take their work and, you know, basically pretend like I know something about it. So let's think of it this way. So the oldest part of our brain is the reptilian brain. And that's the brain where our basic fight or flight functions reside, meaning that when we feel threatened as a being, that the amygdala fires and the brain starts to send out signals, and we secrete adrenaline, cortisol, and basically in an effort to fundamentally protect ourselves. So that's at the most basic level. If you look at the limbic brain, my understanding is, or the mammalian brain, which is kind of the middle brain, that's where the center of our emotions are. So they're not quite as extreme as fight or flight, but fight or flight certainly can stimulate our emotions. And then you have our prefrontal cortex, which is our cognition, our later functions. They come, the human brain has the capacity in a certain way to watch the other functions in the way that we do in meditation. So you can learn to use your cognition to simply watch what's happening in the rest of your awareness. And so really what we're trying to do is to use meditation practice first to show us that we're not our emotions. I'm not my anger. I'm not my lust. I'm not my jealousy. Like, they can come and go. And meditation really helps us with that. And then as we move more deeply into practice, we can then start to include our emotions because we've gotten so familiar with them, and we know how to participate with self-regulation by using the breath and other practices, so that I can actually include my anger, use it as a source of information, allow it to transmute, to become clarity, or to become empowerment, or become taking a strong stand. You know, I can let my jealousy inform what it is I value and what I want from my life. I can use my desire to actually develop my heart and my compassion. So in Trungpa's teaching, the transmutation of emotion is really all about getting to that stage in practice where you can include emotions, you can feel the rush of the energy, and you can also capture the intelligence without emotion actually running away with you. And if it does happen periodically, you can regroup and recover. So I talk a lot with my students about, it's not that you get mad, it's that how long do you stay mad? How much can you close that gap until you're literally functioning in the emotion in the moment? Does that make sense, Travis, what I just said?
It does, because because I'm familiar with these teachings somewhat, and I see I know that, you know, for me at first the idea of allowing the energy of the emotions to move without resistance or closing down, and that allowing for the actual intelligence or helpful qualities of that emotion to manifest rang true to me, and has been like several years now of actually seeing in more nuanced ways how that works, and how I how I have a lot of room to learn how to do that more, that kind of thing. So there's definitely, it's a little tip of the iceberg kind of huge thing, I think.
Yeah, it is a tip of the iceberg, huge thing. Absolutely. And, I think all of us are familiar with the idea of spiritual bypass, where we learn how to disidentify or how to distance from our emotions in such a way that we can kind of preserve this unruffled state of composure, and just how frozen that really becomes. That differentiation is very helpful in the beginning so that we can start to learn how to really watch sensation and watch emotion and watch our thoughts. And then over time, learning how to integrate the energy and be more spontaneous with our emotional states, it's a much more fulfilling and whole place to be than to be simply I don't feel. And I really do believe people can occupy states of mind that we might call states of the absolute, where literally nothing, they just literally are not being ruffled. But we're really looking to be a full human being, not simply an unruffled human being.
Ruffled is maybe the first description that comes to mind when I start thinking about conflict. Mm-hmm. And why I avoid it or would rather not have it. And by the way, there's, for the audience who hasn't looked into Diane's teachings, you have a presentation of the different styles, sort of, general styles that we have. Maybe some of us have one style more pronounced or tendency towards one style than another style, and those would be, let me see if I can remember, avoidance, which is I think the one that I relate to the most. And then there's an aggressive style, and the one who goes along with things. And what was the term for that one?
Accommodating.
The accommodating. So the accommodating style, the avoidance style, the aggressive style, and then a fourth one that is in there is passive aggressive, which is maybe a mix of the two. And these for the Buddhist Dharma people out there map onto or relate to the three poisons of passion, aggression, and ignorance. And conflict, so I have, avoidance here, is that somehow like it doesn't seem like there's too much conflict in my life, and so maybe I don't have to think about it. But then when I think about it more, I see like subtle kind of conflict, and it's kind of a sneaky thing, like the extent to which I'm actually in harmony and open and communicating, or when I'm sort of shut down, that it doesn't need to be like a fist swinging in the air thing.
Yes, totally.
To mark a state of conflict. So I wonder if you could, this is kind of rambling a little bit, but I wonder if just to begin, like, is conflict, you say it's, it's natural and it's part of all of our lives, but is it necessarily, showing up in all of our lives? And if it's not, is it just the case that we're not noticing it, or would rather, tell ourselves a story that it's not? Where to begin, even thinking about it?
Well, we could look at it this way. Let's look at continuum. So the universe is unified. It's one. We are one. And the universe is also two, right? It's, in other words, wherever there's a slight difference, there's an opportunity for creativity. So the universe actually evolves through difference. I've been a student of Ken Wilber's for many years, and he says that, well, many people say that quarks become atoms, atoms become molecules, molecules become cells, and life builds itself up in complexity. And quarks are all the same, and then when they coalesce and become an atom, then suddenly they're different. And it's through that difference that creativity actually emerges. So our differences are really, really critical, right? So I think of conflict as a difference, as an extreme difference that is fueled by emotion or fueled by resources. So conflict is simply an exaggerated difference. So I think all of us were highly, highly socialized. And E.O. Wilson, the very famous sociobiologist, has basically said that there are we're as highly social as termites, bees, ants. So we have to give credit to how much we get along. I mean, we get along amazingly when you consider the mega cities on the globes, and then some people have done some research saying that the violence is actually on the decrease. So we live in very harmonious states a lot of the time. And when conflicts arise, we're very adept at taking care of that. Some of us avoid, some of us just accommodate. The more competitive or aggressive of us will actually kind of fight it out. And then there are kinds of work that you do where more conflict's allowed. If you're a lawyer, it's a highly stylized form of conflict. If you're an athlete, competition is very much a part of that. If you're a chef on television, competition is part of that. So the differences are fantastic. The differences are what allow us to become creative and for new forms to emerge. So we can flatten differences, we can heighten differences, we can get stuck in differences, we can fuel differences. And when we do, we also know that one of the most dangerous things there is the strife that comes between groups and tribes and clans and nations, that our ethnocentric strife is the worst kind of difference there is on the planet, because it's very dangerous when humans get into that, as we know. So I would say that we're always always experiencing harmony, always experiencing difference. It's a question of kind of how skillful we are, and do we know if a conflict's persistent, what we could do differently. If we find ourselves as a person who, for whatever reason, is getting fired by our employer over and over, or arguing with our professors over and over, or just getting married and not having a good experience and then remarrying, and then it's still there, and then the third time you're still having the same kind of fights. So to me, there's always conflict, it's always happening. The question is, how are we working with it? Are we working with it in a skillful way so that we can capture the intelligence of the conflict and actually use it for growth? Are we able to, if it doesn't have much value, are we able to take care of it in an efficient way and hopefully not participate in long-term patterns of dealing with conflict that actually create suffering for us and for other people? So that tends to be the sort of the generalized way that I think about it. And so everybody can improve their skill set. I just have no doubt about that. I mean, just having been in lots of conflicts with lots of people over the years, I so appreciate the people I know who actually are good at it. They can hang in there and get through the emotion and clarify the issues and maybe negotiate an outcome or look for a higher, more interesting solution that includes both. But it's not a lot of people that do that all that well, in my view.
So in your in the book, in the chapter of the book that I've seen, you identify fear as being right there in the center of maybe our discomfort with conflict, and it could be fear of damage to our physical body, damage to our relationships, to our sense of belonging in a group. And interestingly, I think fear seems to be the sort of barrier between, I think, a person and creativity emerging as an artist myself. So I think that's an interesting link there. I wonder if you could say something about fear, conflict, creativity, how those kind of go back and forth, or the interplay between all of that.
Yeah, well, anytime a system is disrupted and there's a disruption to the homeostasis, there's a potential for creativity. So imagine that as an artist, you're working on something and you have a certain kind of excitement that's driving you, but there's also some underlying fear about whether or not it's going to be okay. Well, is that fear, are you able to work with it in a way that it contributes positively to the project, or is it immobilizing? And I think that's one of the things about fear, is that some people seem to be able to work with it and let those states be in the body, and other people have a very hard time with that. And so they kind of return to the status quo in order not to feel that quality of disruption. And I think meditation is great for that reason, because it actually gives us the capacity to let ourselves experience disrupted states like fear. Anytime an emotion floods, it's a disrupted state. the experience of chaos is a disrupted state. And we know that creativity often arises out of, you know, just optimal amounts of chaos, of disruption. Of there has to be a certain kind of dynamism for creativity to emerge. You know, when we're in really stable relationships or in really peaceful periods of our own life or really peaceful periods in culture, not a whole lot comes forward. So conflict is very important to the creative process, but it has to be, you have to either know how to work with it, or it has to be at a level, you know, like we call it like optimal discomfort, just the optimal amount of discomfort. Because if you have too much or you don't know how to work with it at all, you're going to shut down and basically just try to get the feeling to go away. Self-medicate, go to sleep, do all the things we do.
Uh-huh. I'm getting a funky feedback. Meditation and the skills that we can develop may allow us to accommodate some like more of that discomfort than we have previously, something like that. Because I find me, you know, either related to really opening up into creativity or into conflict. Once it's rolling, and I'm glad that I have usually, but there's some like, maybe it's like a laziness or the fear of the intensity or something that kind of gets in the way there, that I think after having been a meditation practitioner for several years, I think I can tolerate, or I'm okay with more discomfort or shakiness, or, you know, I can go further before it starts to become a problem than before, something like that.
Well, I have a new book coming out with Shambhala in the spring, and I talk a little bit more about some of these things from a physiological point of view. But I think it's important for people to know that adrenaline in the body and other stress hormones, they don't feel good. You know, what feels good, I mean, they feel good if you're in a highly concentrated state and you're focused and you have adrenaline, then along with a few other chemicals, you can get into a flow state, right? Because that excitement and focus are at a pitch. But for the average kind of conflict we have with another human being, the body registers it as completely dangerous. And so, you know, the idea, as soon as our, you know, we might feel the signs of a little bit of fight or flight, in the sense that we'll feel our heart rate increase, right? Our breathing becomes more shallow. Our palms might become sweaty. We might feel some heat around our throat or some tightening in the jaw. Our shoulders might start to hunch up. We'll feel nausea or trembling in the solar plexus. And, you know, that's all those things are examples that your amygdala has determined that the environment's not safe, and is basically giving you the signal at a very, very primitive level, you know, to take care of yourself. And so I think sometimes we tend to deal with conflict from a more psychological place, and we don't realize how powerful the physiology is. And so part of the process is to learn how to experience those sensations and be with them, and even express them to a certain extent if it's helpful, and remain present. And as you do that, you actually start to find that you have more tolerance for these states, you know, that you don't freak out at the same level that you used to. Maybe there's even some neural networking going on, you know, that's allowing your prefrontal cortex to actually stay online. Because normally when you go into fight or flight, you lose access to your higher cognitive functions, which means you don't think very well, you don't remember very well, you can't draw helpful conclusions. Everything feels like it's going to last forever. Like, in other words, rationality just simply disappears when fight or flight is at its peak. And if you're in an emotional exchange with someone, there's very little rationality. There's a lot of arguments going on, but mostly they're in the service of this highly activated nervous system. So I think it's something that you learn how to do. And I don't believe that meditation cultures are necessarily the best place to work on it, because there's this kind of false idea that you should go around in a state of undisturbed bliss at all times. And if you're not kind of in this, you know, undisturbed state of bliss, you know, you're doing something wrong. And it's just, from my perspective, it's just not the right approach. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And especially the last part, interesting, because, you know, I live here at Shambhala Mountain Center in community, And
Good. You're
it's
getting
definitely, for myself that I've become familiar with and had a journey with. And I think that, this community, these teachings on spiritual materialism have always been kind of central. Like, watch out for like trying to be a peaceful spiritual person inauthentically or something. So I think that's kind of part of this culture, and still a living exploration. When am I being like authentically kind or gentle or helpful? Or on the other side, when am I actually doing the sharp, wrathful compassion thing, and when am I just actually lashing out aggressively? So these subtle differences between really doing it and kind of pretending to be bodhisattva or whatever.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. And I think, some of these things are culturally determined. I mean, if you're from America, you're going to have a very different emotional temperament than if you're Swiss. If you're Russian, if you're Israeli, I mean, that really matters. Some cultures are very explicit in how they express emotion, or explicit in how they deal with issues. Other cultures are more implicit. You kind of have to work around the scenes. And some cultures are very expressive emotionally. If you're African American from the States, if you're Jewish American, if you're going to have a different emotional Italian, you're going to have a different temperament than, say, somebody who's of Northern European descent. There's just in cities have different temperaments. I live in Salt Lake City. It's a different place emotionally than New York City is. It's, in New York City, it'd be very common just to have it out with somebody, and then that's the end of it. In Salt Lake City, that would sort of signify that you could never talk to each other again, or something. So I think we have to really take our cultural differences into account. There's stuff related to gender that makes a difference in how we process and express emotion. But the idea that we can all become more emotionally literate, as a friend of mine says, or sophisticated, there's no doubt in my mind that we can do that, and that meditation practice is a great support, and that you almost have to be in a learning community to really be able to do it well. A community that's interested in growing the same skill set.
This is clearly such a rich path of inquiry. So much more to explore and directions to discuss. But to keep it somewhat brief today, I wonder if there may be something that you could offer, technique, advice, pith, instruction, related to maybe that moment where we start getting all the physiological stuff. The adrenaline is, the amygdala is firing, and we're like, this is unsafe, and the lizard brain is going and all of that. When that begins occurring, I wonder if there's something that you could offer us that we could hopefully remember in those moments and start to maybe shift the pattern a bit.
I think the first thing is to simply be curious. Just to be curious about what you're actually experiencing. And the Trungpa Rinpoche used the expression befriend, or to make friends with to make friends with these sensations on a bodily level, and really get interested in them, and notice your ability to actually tolerate what they feel like. So on an embodied level, I would suggest that. I think in terms of the breath, anytime you just regulate the breath in terms of its rhythm and smoothness, the body immediately adapts and quits producing stress hormones. Now they may take another 15, 20 minutes to clear out of the body, but the fact, if you can, the old adage of breathing, being conscious, using conscious breath is really, really true. And then the last thing I would say is just to ask yourself the question, what's right about all this? That question always worked for me. What's right about it? Rather than what's wrong about it, what's right about it? Because as soon as we feel all that, we think something wrong. There's something wrong. There's something bad that's happening. And so if you could use that little cognitive cue to ask yourself, well, what's right about this? What's right about me being upset? My being upset? What's right about the other person doing what they're doing? And what can be learned there? All of that would go a very long way.
Thank you. I will keep it in there and in here, and hopefully the audience will as well. So clearly, some more to explore here, and just to remind folks that you are going to be leading a very full 4-day retreat up here at Shambhala Mountain Center, June 17th through the 21st.
Yep.
And I wonder if there's anything that hasn't been said yet that you may want to say about the retreat itself.
Well, we'll be sitting in meditation. We'll be looking at the ideas that you and I have been exploring, and then we'll also have lots of opportunity for practice. As we know, from a Zen or Buddhist perspective, it's all about practice. So getting to practice, getting to role play, getting to work on your listening skills, getting to see how to express yourself with a little more integrity. Those are the things we're going to be working on. So it's a very good class in terms of just working on basic skills, and then it's going to be grounded in meditation. And it's always great to go to the Shambhala Mountain Center for sure.
Well, it sounds wonderful, and we're definitely looking forward to hosting you and any of you in the audience who are watching or listening. Looking forward to hosting you as well. You can learn more about the program, which again is titled Everything is Workable, Transforming Everyday Conflicts into Creative Opportunities at shambhalamountain.org, and it's right up there on the homepage, or if you click in programs, you can see that and all the other retreats that we're hosting. I also encourage you to check out Diane's book, Everything is Workable, A Zen Approach to Conflict Resolution, and that's available from Shambhala Publications. And Diane, I thank you again so much for taking the time today to have some discussion.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Travis. Thanks, everybody. I look forward to seeing you. Bye. Everyone.